Councillor Shaves, take your seat.
Yes, ma'am.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Administrative Policies Committee meeting. I'm going to begin by calling the public meeting to order. The Administrative Policies Committee will host a public meeting beginning now at 6 p.m. To consider tax write-offs pursuant to sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act 2001. And I do not see any members of the public. Anyone online?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are no members of the public online.
Thank you. So with that, there are no public comments then, so we will close the public meeting. Please note the time. And now we'll call our meeting to order. So I need approval for the agenda, please, and for an added. So we have an addendum to add. So do I have a mover and a second for approval of the agenda with the addendum? Councillor McLaren, Councillor Shaves, and all right, all in favor? Wonderful, thank you, that's carried. Now I need confirmation of the minutes for the meeting held on Thursday, July 6th, 2023. And is there anyone who needs to correct the minutes in any way? Nope, okay. All right, so I need a mover, please, for the minutes. Councillor McLaren, and a seconder. Councillor Shaves. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. We have no delegations, no briefings, so we're right into the business at hand. So first we have to resolve ourselves into the board for the Rita Crest, the Rita Crest Home Board of Management. So I need someone to move that and second it, please. Okay, Councillor Amos, Councillor Shaves, all in favor? All right, so we are now in our meeting for the Rita Crest Home Report, so I'm going to ask staff to introduce that report, please, and thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. The report provided to you this evening provides information from June 16th through to September 15th of this year. The home's waitlist continues to grow and is currently sitting at just under 540 individuals. Our overall occupancy rate is just over 97%, which is in compliance with our legislation. You will note in the report that the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care was in the home to complete our proactive inspection. This inspection process is new under the Fixing Long-Term Care Act of 2021 and was our first experience with this type of inspection. The process is very similar to that of the resident quality inspection process, which was within the previous Long-Term Care Homes Act legislation of 2007. These were in place up to and including 2018, when they were then placed on hold by the ministry. The proactive inspections itself is very detailed and reviews all aspects of the home's operations. We have provided to you the most up-to-date guidance for COVID-19 within long-term care homes. We continue to see an increase in both COVID-19 and respiratory illness within our community and also within our home and within the long-term care sector here in Kingston. With the increase in illness, we have re-implemented masking within our home on all resident areas inside of the home. Our home is currently experiencing a COVID-19 outbreak on our third floor with 4 positive cases. With the continued uptake of COVID-19 vaccination by our residents, we are only seeing very mild symptoms amongst those that are positive right now, which is really positive for all of our residents. We are also seeing some really mild symptoms amongst staff that are affected from that outbreak. We continue to offer the COVID-19 booster doses to all of our residents as they become eligible, and we are also just currently this week providing the influenza vaccine to all of our residents. We continue to complete many of the renovation and upgrades throughout our home and are starting to see really great results and positive feedback from our residents and families. We are also in the process this week of initiating the full replacement of our fire alarm system. This is home-wide and it is expected to take us through to the end of 2024. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the report.
Thank you for that, Ms. Keys. So do any members of the committee have questions for the report? Councillor Shaves.
Thank you. Just one for clarification. Sorry. For clarification, and if you can share the information, there was a report, it was mentioned about misuse of resident funds. Just wondering if that could be confirmed as if my concern is with regard to staff or anything. Thank you.
Yes. And through you, Madam Chair. So under the legislation, we are required to report any allegations of abuse that is inclusive of financial abuse. We do from time to time see this type of abuse within our home. Often it's related to powers of attorney and or substitute decision makers, possibly misusing funds of residents, not paying bills. So we do inform the police and the ministry at that time. This case is a bit different in the fact that we had a resident who thought a friend was visiting, provided their bank card, and funds were stolen from their account on a number of occasions. We did inform the police of this and did come to find out there was coercion involved. This individual was well known to the police and was actually just out on probation and was apprehended after this. So that case has been closed, and it is very unusual. We don't see this often, but that is why we did inform the police and the ministry for that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Anyone else from the committee? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. A couple of questions. In regards to the ministry SNAP, search is not the right word, ministry...
Inspections?
Thank you, that's the right word. The SNAP ministry inspection. When was the last time a scheduled ministry inspection was done, and when was the last time a surprise ministry inspection was done?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. We have never had a scheduled visit by the ministry. All of the ministry inspections are unannounced, inclusive of the proactive inspections. So that is intended to be annual. It will not be planned. We do see them come in to review critical incident reports that are mandatory reports to the ministry, as well as complaints, and those inspections are also unplanned and unannounced.
Okay, thank you. In the ministry inspection, it was noted that there were 3 incidents or occurrences that had to be filed. One of them was point of care documentation, where 3 people were identified to have misrepresentation or missing documentation in their files. Were any of the 3 put at health risk because of that?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Those 3 incidents were related to bathing. So there was 3 documentations where it was not noted how the bathing was completed, whether it was in the tub, in bed, or refused by the resident. So very minimal risk to the resident in terms of quality of care.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, and it's under the financial component. Right now, the administrative section or the nursing section is $383,000 underspent, which tells me we're short-staffed, which leads to my next question. Is the care in jeopardy that is being provided to the residents?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Much of that underspend in the nursing department right now is related to the direct hours of care funding. That funding, we just got our 3rd tranche of funding. Our next one is in March of this coming year, and it will be our final. It is based on a sliding scale, so we base this year's funding on last year's funding, and in fact, this year we received more direct hours of care funding, which is directly for the nursing program, than we had the year previous. So we're just working with that funding now to secure additional staff. So I would say it's not impacting residents' care, it's in addition to our scheduled staffing that we have now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from committee? Okay. So no members of the public then are here. And so now I just, the report was for information only. I need a mover and a seconder so that we can rise from the Board of Management for the Rideau Crest home. Councillor Amos, Councillor McLaren, all in favor? And we're all done. Thank you, Ms. Keith. Appreciate it. All right, so we're on to the next part of our agenda, tax write-offs pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001. Can staff please introduce the report?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So you have before you the tax write-off report that has a list of write-offs. This is a normal report that the committee sees 3 or 4 times a year. There is an exhibit attached with details of the write-offs that are being recommended. The majority of them relate to buildings that have been damaged by fire or destroyed, or some buildings that are undergoing major renovations and therefore eligible for the tax write-offs. About $120,000 that's being recommended, about which 3/4 of that is municipal and the rest is school board. And that 3/4, about $90,000, has been included in the operating budget and will be funded that way. If there are any questions on specific details, I believe we do have Mr. Walker online if there's any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Kennedy. So going to the committee, are there any questions from the committee? Okay, Councillor Amos.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a quick one. Do you see this tax write-off affecting the budget in any sort of way moving forward with the general operating budget? I know it's small, so.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. So, no, I don't see anything significant. We do every year analyze we have set up an allowance for what we think might be coming. And so we have set up a good allowance, particularly knowing that we do have a reassessment coming at some point in time, and not knowing what that is going to look like. But certainly subsequent to a reassessment, you quite often will get a number of write-offs for changes in assessment. And so we are starting to allow for that now so that we won't have a huge hit in the operating budget when that eventually does happen.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee? Okay, and we still have no members of the public? Okay, so on that note, we will now call the vote for the recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee recommends as follows: that Council authorize the City Treasurer to write off uncollected taxes in the amount of $123,725.30, of which $91,099.04 is the city's portion, and the amount charged back to the school boards is $32,626.26 for the properties listed in Exhibit A to report number AP 23013. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Amos? Okay, Councillor McLaren, all in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Okay, so we are on to our third item of business, which is approval of additional administrative monetary penalties. And I invite staff to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. The purpose of the report before you tonight is to request the expansion of the administrative monetary penalties regime to 3 additional bylaws: the streets bylaw, the short-term rentals bylaw, and the property standards bylaw. AMPs are an important intermediate enforcement tool that we can use to gain compliance from residents with these particular bylaws. I'll note that 2 of the 3 bylaws that are subject to this report, the streets bylaw and the short-term rentals bylaw, already have the most stringent enforcement tools associated with them, that being set fines through the Provincial Offences Act. We use those periodically, but they are the strongest tool that we have. It would be, the recommendation that we're making tonight is to give us an intermediate tool so that we don't necessarily have to be going to court and having the associated administrative burden, both from a staff time and quite honestly from a resident's time. If we can gain a compliance with a lesser tool, that being the administrative monetary penalty, we would be quite happy with that, and we could ultimately get that compliance that we're looking for in the bylaw. So that's what we're looking at. Of importance, and I'll note it is a little timely, the streets bylaw does have some aspects to it that we would be looking at potentially using. I would rather not, but we could potentially be using them for homecoming. So we could be exercising those quite quickly. We'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Smith. So are there any questions from committee? Oh, were you first? All right, Councillor McLaren, go ahead.
Traditionally, how well have these stood up in court?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Traditionally, how well do these stand up in court? If somebody were to challenge them, eventually it goes to a court, and the judge, I've heard, often throws them out.
Through you, Madam Chair, they do tend to stand up. We haven't used a lot of court stuff recently. There was more court actions during the pandemic when we had the emergency orders and things like that. I can say that in the 14 months that I've been here, we have not issued much in the way of provincial offenses because we've been able to get that compliance that we're looking for using these intermediate tools. So that's great. We're not going to be taking up city prosecutor time with dealing with these kind of compliance issues with the bylaws. We can deal with it with our kind of internal process of using our screening officers and our hearing officers that we bring on and really bring it to a good compliant conclusion.
Okay, anyone else from the committee? Councillor Amos.
Through you, Madam Chair. This is just a point of clarification. When you say highway in the AMP, are you meaning a city street or are you meaning a county road?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, the definition of a highway actually is a city street as well as the sidewalk. Those are all considered part of the public highway under the definition.
Okay.
So that's what we would be looking at.
Okay. Just a point of clarification. When you say promote maintenance, health, and safety on properties, what are you clarifying or doing with that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I assume you're talking about the property standards bylaw, that promotion.
Yeah.
So property standards is actually a bit of a mixed bag in the way that you enforce it. It's the one enforcement piece that we have that is outside of the Municipal Act. It's under the Building Code Act. So there's some very strict things that flow out of the Building Code Act. That's how we're empowered. So the use of an AMP would actually allow us to, if we're having a landlord or a homeowner who's at all reticent in trying to fix the property standards issue that we have identified, an AMP, in my opinion anyway, is a good way to potentially give them a little poke in order to get them to move along to become compliant, rather than the system that we would have would be a Part 3 summons, Provincial Offences Act summons, and that's a full-on with JPs and judges and the whole deal, prosecutors, that type of thing. So we think that the availability of this more intermediate piece, in particular in the Property Standards Act, that will be effectively a little prod in order to get people to follow the direction that we're giving them to improve their property, to fix the issues that they're having. And we do find a lot of this in relation to landlords and tenants and things like that. So we're actually quite excited about the possibility of having this piece. It'll, again, just give us that one really good tool, and we're not gonna have to go to the far extreme of taking someone to court in order to get them to become compliant.
Perfect, thank you. Just two quick comments. One is about the use of the streets and the, sorry, my glasses are just causing havoc, deposit leaves and brush on the highway. There are two motor vehicles that this puts them at jeopardy, at risk of accidents, and that's cyclists and motorcyclists. So if our bylaw officers could be diligent in that area, I would personally would be appreciative for obvious reasons. The last one, which is not listed under here, is the regulation of animals. And I know we haven't tackled that yet. And that's the leaving animals in cars while people go in shopping. And I know this is opening up a can of worms and jurisdiction boundaries, but is there an AMP that can be applied to this as a meantime? And I'm kind of saying this as a food for thought for potentially down the road.
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, it's always possible. You're right, it is a little bit of an interjurisdictional issue, the particular offense that you're talking about. We actually do have a meeting with some of our animal control, animal enforcement partners here coming up very shortly. So we can definitely talk about that. We do have animal bylaw AMPs right now. So, I mean, it would be a matter of coming back to committee and council to get those types of things approved, but we can definitely explore some of that. It is an issue, and it is going to be one of the topics of conversation we have with our partners next week.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shays? All right.
Thank you. A few questions. On page 31, recommended AMP, which include bylaw number 2021-010, failure to adhere to parking regulations contained in the parking bylaw. What are these parking regulations, and are they different from regular violations?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So that's under the short-term rental bylaw. That gives us the potential to hold a short-term rental operator responsible for parking regulations that they are in effect causing to be breached through their operation of that short-term rental. So say, for instance, they aren't providing parking or they aren't providing the appropriate information to the people who are staying at that short-term rental, and that person ends up breaching a parking regulation and we ticket them, there is the possibility for us under that particular AMP to also hold that short-term rental operator responsible for that breach in a certain way. So if, for instance, the operator is telling the person who's staying at the short-term rental, yes, go ahead and park on the front lawn. Well, we could hold the driver of that vehicle responsible under our parking bylaw for parking in an unauthorized place, and this is just an example, and then we could hold the short-term rental operator responsible for allowing that to happen and in effect breaching the parking regulation. I don't anticipate it's going to be a big usage kind of AMP, although we do get periodic concerns raised from residents about the associated traffic and parking with short-term rentals in Kingston.
Follow-up? Will this include B&Bs?
Through you, Madam Chair, it depends on the size of the B&B. So some B&Bs are actually short-term rentals by definition, some aren't. So it very well possibly could include certain B&Bs in Kingston. They would have to be small ones.
Further follow-up? Would this include rental properties, especially including secondary suites?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the short-term rental bylaw is specifically for properties who are being rented for less than 30 days. So not necessarily if it's any longer term of a lease or a rental arrangement or anything. No, this wouldn't apply to that. We are reviewing residential rental licensing and things like that coming up, and there will be a report coming actually to this committee in December on that, and we will be examining parking-related issues in relation to residential rentals. So we'll see what could happen with that.
Thank you, because last year I was informed by some who were in these secondary suites and were told they weren't allowed to park in the driveway or so, and they're supposed to, if they're going to have a secondary suite or even just a rental, they should have at least one parking spot per unit. So, which causes problems for parking. Also, the penalty structure. Who receives the funds for the AMPs? Is it the city?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it actually is the city. It's a line item, a revenue line item in our various budgets. So our enforcement team has a AMP revenue line, and that is used to offset some of the costs of running. The whole purpose of an AMP, it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be really a cost recovery plus kind of thing. I get that not entirely super accurate, but I think from a practical perspective, that's a reasonable definition. So we're trying to get recover the money back that we've been spending on trying to get compliance here. So that does remain in the enforcement budget and in the licensing budget for the short-term rental licenses or AMPs. And yeah, we use that to run stuff from day to day.
Well, that answers or leads me right into my next question. And with it not being punitive, in reviewing Schedule B, administrative monetary penalties, reviewed included several, if not many of, should possibly be increased. Because will this be coming, or does a motion need to be put forward by council? Because especially with regards to parking and some with regards to animals and racing, they don't appear to be very punitive, and people keep violating them.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we're actually constantly reviewing them. These three were kind of a priority for us right now because we wanted to get the STRs sorted out. We wanted to get some property standards action going in streets, like I mentioned, for homecoming. We do have a bit of a plan to bring further ones forward, and as part of that plan, we always do review the quantums of the administrative monetary penalties. As we mentioned in the report, these are often based on the set fines that we get from the courts. So it's usually somewhere around a 75% of what the set fine is. We also do a fair amount of jurisdictional review on this just to see what other municipalities in Ontario are doing. So between the jurisdictional review, between what the set fines are existing, between what the actual situation is out in the real world, we can up those, we can lower them as we see fit. So yes, we will be looking at a number of these. I know there were some concerns raised about some of the yards amps, and some of the wording seemed to be a little bit weird, didn't seem to be very practical or clear about what they are. So yeah, we are going to have a look at those. Yards is probably the next one you're going to see.
Thank you, and I look forward to that report.
Thank you. So again, there's no members of the public here. So now we'll call the vote for the recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee recommends to Council that bylaw number 2020-69, a bylaw to establish a process for administrative penalties as amended, be further amended as per Exhibit A to report number AP 23016, and that bylaw number 2021-10, a bylaw to license and regulate short-term rentals in the City of Kingston, be amended as per Exhibit B to report number AP 23-016, and that bylaw number 2004-190, a bylaw to regulate the use of city streets, be amended as per Exhibit C to report number AP 23-016, and that bylaw number 2005-100, a bylaw for prescribing standards for the maintenance and occupancy of property within the City of Kingston, be amended as per Exhibit D to report number AP 23-016. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Amos, Councillor Shaves, all in favor? That passes. Okay. So we're on to item D, our 2023 external audit plan. So this is our last item of business. Can staff please introduce this report?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So we have joining us tonight virtually, Lori Huber from KPMG, our engagement partner for the 2023 external audit, as well as Caitlin Cox, who's the senior manager on our audit. They have provided in the report a copy of their external audit planning memo, which they're going to walk through with the committee tonight to give us a bit of an idea as to what the plan is for the 2023 external audit, including their general approach to the audit, the materiality level, and some of the other areas of focus. Also gives the opportunity for the committee to ask any questions of the auditors and provide any input prior to the audit process beginning for the 2023 year end. So with that, Madam Chair, I turn it over to KPMG.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here before you tonight to share with you the highlights of our 2023 audit plan. As Ms. Kennedy had mentioned, we have provided you with quite a fulsome document, which certainly covers all of the highlights as part of our audit plan to have conversations with yourselves, being those charged with governance. We won't go through each of the slides here tonight with you, but we've certainly tried to pull out the things that I think are of most importance to you, and certainly will welcome any questions that you might have on what you hear tonight. So this really is our opportunity to get in front of you. It's very much early days. We've had lots of conversations with management up to this point to gain an understanding of what might be new and different that might be thought to cause a change in either our risk assessment or any of our audit procedures that we will plan to undergo. So one of the pieces that is part of our audit plan that you will see on slide number 5 is the concept of materiality. This is really at the crux of any financial statement audit audit, it is a reminder to share with you that a financial statement audit is set at a level of materiality to say, what would a user of the financial statements be changed to the extent there's any differences in the accounts? Would it change any reliance of a user on the financial statement? So you will see there's a couple of slides, and really the important message to bring home here tonight is we actually aren't proposing to change our level of materiality. Our materiality has remained at an overall financial statement aggregate financial reporting materiality of $10 million. So as a reminder to the group, it is a financial statement audit that is consolidated. You will hear from Caitlin in a minute what that means. So at a group level, we are proposing to keep our overall level of materiality at $10 million. We are bound by the handbook to keep it within certain levels of range based on our professional judgment and based on our risk assessment. You will see in our report, we do continue to say overall, the financial statement risk for the city of Kingston is a low level. We can go anywhere between 0.5% up to 3%, but we've consciously kept it at around 2% over the course of time. And what that will mean is to the extent we identify any differences in the accounts when we come back to you upon completion of our audit in the spring, early summer, we will then use that level of materiality as a basis of our threshold to come back to you with any differences that we might identify in the account. So really a long-winded version to say not a whole lot of change with respect to materiality this year. Some of the other things that you will see in the balance of our report is on page number 8 in terms of what is new and different. Often we will have new accounting standards that will come into play that don't really impact the financial statements. I would say fiscal 2023 is not one of those years, unfortunately. There will be a new accounting standard that I think some of you might have heard us speak of in previous years, and that's a new standard coming into play with respect to asset retirement obligations. So you will see as part of our risk assessment that has been contemplated as part of our plan, and you will continue to hear what that will mean as part of the financial statement audit. It's certainly part of our audit plan. So with that, I'll pass things over to Caitlin to walk you through a few of the other highlights.
Perfect. Thanks, Lori. The next section of our report speaks to our group audit. And as Lori alluded to, the financial statements are prepared on a consolidated basis, which ultimately means they include the operations of the city as well as the other local boards and agencies underneath the greater city umbrella. Each of these components are audited by KPMG, either in our Kingston office or through a partner in our KPMG Waterloo office. As part of our audit of the city, we do ensure that those other entities are appropriately consolidated and incorporated into the financial results of the city as part of our financial reporting. And what you'll see in our report is that we do segregate the individual entities in the city's financial statements into certain categories based on the overall size and scale of the underlying entity as compared to the city's materiality level that Lori previously spoke to. So of note, what I would highlight is of all the components that are included under the city's umbrella, it's really only Utilities Kingston and Kingston Hydro Corporation that get flagged as financially significant components due to their size and scale. These two entities are audited by KPMG through our Waterloo office with support from our Kingston team here locally. So we do communicate with that partner and with that team a bit more formally to ensure that we have an understanding of any changes in operations, results of the audit, and are getting the financial statements to ensure they're appropriately recorded and incorporated into the city's consolidated financial statements at the end of the day. Continuing to move forward in our report, now on slide 12, if you have it in front of you, the next section speaks to our risk assessment summary. As a reminder, our audit is risk-based, so we design procedures to respond to specific areas of risk. We have included lots of details on the specific areas of focus and our risks on the next few slides. So the first one I will highlight is there is only one significant risk, and it is a required risk. This relates to the presumed risk of management override of controls, which under professional standards is presumed to exist in all organizations. There's nothing specific at the city that led to us flagging this risk. To respond to this risk, we will perform the required procedures largely surrounding the financial reporting process as part of our audit procedures. On the next two slides, we've had lots of details on the procedures in our other areas of audit focus. I'm not going to go into detail on each of these, but I will highlight two specific areas. On the first slide here, you will see we have highlighted lots of information and procedures with respect to government grants. If you were to ask us where we spend the majority of our audit attention, it is absolutely on grant revenue, ensuring any performance criteria have been met and that any underlying receivables, payables, or deferrals are appropriately recorded. On the next slide, so slide 15 now, the other item I would highlight is asset retirement obligations. This is a new area, and as Lori mentioned, it is a new accounting standard in fiscal 2022, or 23, sorry. And due to the complexity of the standard and the estimation uncertainty that is involved in determining that liability, we have flagged this as an elevated risk or just a heightened area of audit focus for the current year on initial adoption. There are lots of details on this slide with respect to the procedures we will perform, which largely include our review of management's process to determine the liability, as well as reviewing any external reports or experts that were used to develop the liability, and also vouching a sample of the underlying data to supporting documentation. Continuing to move forward, the next section of our report speaks to our key milestones in our audit process. We have it broken into almost 4 quadrants, and over the fall and early winter, we complete our preliminary risk assessment procedures and our interim audit fieldwork. This is the phase of the audit we're in right now, leading up to our interim audit, where we make sure we have an understanding of any changes in operations throughout the year, have our discussions here this evening, and then complete our interim audit fieldwork upcoming at the end of November, early December. At the end of March, that's when we begin the bulk of our audit work and substantive testing as part of our year-end audit fieldwork, with our reporting back to the committee and council at the early summer in June and July 2024. The final section of our report speaks to the additional audit work we do complete for the City of Kingston. A key requirement of our role as external auditors is to ensure we remain independent from the city. We have listed the other audit services we do provide to the city on this slide and wanted to highlight that none of the services here prohibit our ability to remain independent, and will certainly reconfirm our independence as part of our audit findings report on conclusion of our audit. With that, I'll hand it back to Lori to wrap up our presentation.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. As we move into the appendices, you will see there's a lot of information in there, which is really informational items for your perusal. If I could pick out one that might be of interest to the group, I would take you to Appendix 6A, which is Audit and Assurance Insights. That is a live document, a live link, live links in that document, which will take you to our KPMG website, which has a whole host of resource materials, particularly developed for those charged with governance, to ensure that you are adequately equipped with the things that you should in your role. So with that, I will pause. That is our report from an audit planning perspective for fiscal 2023, and we would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Huber and Ms. Cox. I'll now go to committee for questions. Councillor Shaves.
I have one question. Within the attached document on page 6, where it states prior year accumulated surplus of, I quote, $1,779,870,000, just a little confused as this, is this just an example of a dollar amount? No. Or, because I'm just wondering, this is a large amount of funds which are accumulated, so do I get my shopping list out, or can someone please explain?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is a great question, and it can be somewhat misleading. I will certainly take the first cut of the question, and Ms. Kennedy, to the extent you might want to chime in as well, please feel free to do so. So that is one of the metrics as we look to establish the benchmark to determine materiality from the audit perspective. Believe it or not, accumulated surplus, another way to phrase it would be your accumulated municipal equity. It is a combination of things, but when you look at the financial statements, most of that amount is not available sitting there in cash to do other things with. It is invested in tangible capital assets, so it's tied up money and not free money to do other things with. So that is the number on your financial statements, but it is a little bit misleading in the sense that it is already restricted, if you will.
Okay, officially depressed now, thank you.
Okay, any other members of committee? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. couple of questions. In regards to materiality and $10 million, you had indicated that the corporation is at low risk. So I'm curious why the materiality was not raised then, in that you're deeming that the corporation is low.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is a good question. I often think about that one each and every year. I would say, generally speaking, there's somewhat of a size test and a complexity piece that goes into that factor as well. Ultimately, it is our professional judgment, and I would say with the size and scale of the city of Kingston, 2% feels a little bit more comforting with a little bit of room for error or for buffer, if you will, than going at 3%. If I was to say, looking at around the surrounding area with the lower tier municipalities, their operations are far more simple than what you see at the city of Kingston as being quite a decentralized organization. That's why we tend to scale back from the 3% that we otherwise could. But I easily could come to you with 3%, but we've historically stayed around the 2% mark.
Okay. I would encourage the auditing team if they could go to 3%. I think it's justified in your wording and what you're indicating that the city is at low risk. I understand the complexity, but everything is indicated through clean audits over the years that I believe the city has earned a 3% grade, but that is between your corporation and Desiree's team to discuss. The next question I have is in regards to the other component audits. Is the same materiality used against each of those corporations, or is it a different number?
Another great question, Madam Chair, through you. Once we opine on an individual set of financial statements, each of those financial statements is subject to a separate and distinct individualized level of materiality. So the basis of the calculation is the same in each of those respective audits. So we use the same benchmarks, which are typically revenues or expenses. However, those numbers would be significantly less just because of the size and scale of those individual operations, which is why when they roll up into the group audit, they aren't identified to be significant components. So we certainly don't have to do any additional work through the course of the group piece on the city books because of the individual audits, but they are audited to a much lower level to be able to opine separately on each of them.
Okay, thank you. In regards to asset retirement obligations, do the staff feel there are any concerns moving forward with the audit that would affect our budget allocations and amortization, anything like that?
Through you, Madam Chair. At this time, we do not feel that there is anything significant that, as a result of the ARO legislation changes, most of our amortization is unfunded in our budgets at this time, so it doesn't have a material impact on our tax rates or at this time.
Just book value then. Just book value then per usual for that. Okay. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Anyone else from committee? Okay. And no members of the public. So that report was for information only. So we're done with that piece of business. Thank you to the entire financial team. We very much appreciate the work you do. So no motions, no notices of motion, no other business, no correspondence. The date of the next meeting for the Administrative Policy Committee is a special meeting scheduled for Thursday, November 9th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Now I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn, please. Councillor Amos. I do need one more. Okay, Councillor McLaren, thank you very much. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you.